Every week, he doesn't want to take responsibility. He's passing the buck. Is Xavier Woods the problem? Is Xavier Woods going to turn heel? We've been away for a while, but we're back. This is WrstlXtra.
Hi guys. Sorry. I've been waiting to do that for like 2 weeks.
Wow.
Let me do it properly. Yo. This is a WrstlXtra. I'm your boy A Dazzle, the Black Wrestling Advocate, always joined by my trios team, the Real House of Black, Mex, the WrestleManiac, if you will. Yeet. We're yeeting this week, definitely. And of course, the omnipresent man say his name. He will appear. It is Gerard Bonner. Xavier Woods. Interesting. As Mex said, passing the buck, pushing the blame. Now he is making a fight for himself and saying that everyone is talking down to him because they are former champions. He's never won a championship. It's very funny how actually Jey Uso won a championship on the same day. But yeah, are here. Let's do this. Gerard, let me come to you first. In the whole scheme of everything going on, what are your thoughts in terms of how this is going? How they're playing it out. What can we expect?
You know, the irony that we are inching up on the 10-year anniversary of the New Day, and it seems as though, Woods could go heel. It's very interesting. It almost makes you wonder, will they make it to the 10-year mark? And if they do, will that be the moment that he pulls the trigger? Here's what's exciting to me about this. For one, WWE's ability to rebound, to pivot. We saw it earlier this year, of course, with everything that happened with the WrestleMania main event. But we're really seeing it now. I think it is being done so well that people are forgetting that it was about 3 weeks ago that it looked like the linchpin for this was going to be Odyssey Jones. And that's not even a factor anymore, which says that they didn't necessarily need that to make this work. And they didn't even necessarily need the Karrion Kross situation to make this work. This is interesting because it's been so long since we've seen Xavier Woods on the dark side. What could this mean? Now that we are aware of how much he loves video games and how his brain works, like this has potential to really be one of the more exciting things that we didn't see coming, that it would show up. And I think that that's pretty awesome. I'm here for the ride to see where this goes. He has that look in his eyes, like I'm about to do something and y'all aren't ready for it. And if done right, it could be far more interesting than some of the people who have been heels for quite some time. Cue Karrion Kross in the Final Testament.
Wow. Yeah.
I did just name names. Wow.
Yeah.
You started off high. It's going to be that kind of show. It is.
That whole thing got us there. And as you said, it wasn't necessarily needed, but at the same time, it was a way to kind of start the story going. And I guess it did what it did for Xavier. Certainly not Karrion Kross and Final Testament in the end, really. But as you said, we're close to this 10-year anniversary of the New Day formation. Kofi Kingston mentioned, of course, Big E on a couple of occasions as well over the last couple of weeks. Mex, do you think in any way is this leading to an Xavier Woods heel turn, or is it leading to a possible Big E return?
Potentially both is what I'm thinking. I think Big E definitely returns there. So the 10th anniversary is in November, I believe.
Okay.
So we are nicely got time to build and tell this story as WWE like to do. I think we are going to get a heel Xavier Woods. I'm not going to say turn because I don't think he's turning on Kofi Kingston per se.
Okay.
But I think we are going to see a heel aspect of him come out if we're not seeing it already, sort of thing. Like you mentioned, I thought it was almost poetry in motion that Jey Uso won the Intercontinental title, because here is a man that within a tag team they have gone to war with. They've traded this belt several times over the last 10 years, and these are the top two tag teams in WWE history. And now you've seen one man actually go out on his own by force, maybe because of the whole Bloodline saga. And after trying, and God knows this man has tried, he has finally arrived at winning this IC title same night where Xavier Woods, they still can't get a win in the tag division. He's now blaming Rey Mysterio for wanting to focus on Finn Balor, a former world champion, Kofi Kingston, because he's a former world champion. You know, there's all this kind of sour stuff. And I think you might see what has always been like a love-hate respect relationship between the Usos, or Jey Uso, and Xavier Woods, or the New Day, now spiral more into, well, he left and he's went and got it done. Should I leave the New Day sort of thing? Or or he turns heel against Kofi's wishes. Kofi's like, you know, we've had our wars with the Bloodline or the Usos. We're cool with them now, sort of thing. But maybe he does something crazy, like takes out Jey to have an IC match against him. And probably still doesn't win. So I think that's where you might see the heelish behavior. And obviously right now Jey is red hot. If he touches a hair on Jey's head, like, Xavier Woods is a heel. I think it's one of them ones where maybe that is the ignition to really get this going. And then maybe even towards November we see him through the likes of Big E. He comes back to his senses and everything calms down a bit. And the 10th celebration is a load of, booty-oles and unicorns and stuff like that. I think that this is just to kind of give some intrigue to the 10th celebration more than this is a permanent heel turn and gonna go crazy. However, I'm here for the permanent heel turn because he's already doing excellent work just in this kind of tweener area.
For sure. And that's the beauty of this as well. And even just with WWE in general, we forget that sometimes certain stories are here to further other stories as well. So even if it is just for the next, 8 to 10 weeks that we get, this confusion with Xavier Woods, and is he turning? Is he not? Does he, does some heelish stuff and still kind of contemplating what he's doing with himself? It will help, as you said, the intrigue, and hopefully we do get to a place where Big E returns, whether that's in the ring, whether that's just as in an appearance setting, and then as well, just adding Xavier to, I guess, the list of people that Jey can have a feud with, as the Intercontinental Champion as well. Another question I was going to ask is, if we do get some kind of permanent heel turn, or if we do get Xavier, vying for a singles title, do you think it will work out better than his previous singles run, where he became, king of the ring? He had a bit of a thing with Roman Reigns. Do you think a permanent heel turn would work out better for him in the long term?
I do. And I think it'll be because he won't be distracted by the games that he ends up playing as a member of the New Day. The New Day is all about fun. I mean, there was never, if you think about it, at no point during any of their runs, with the exception of a little bit of Big E, did they ever get serious about being champions. When Big E won the world title, he got a little serious. He wasn't all games, but there were still games. But think about it. King of the Ring was a game. You know, the world title run for Kofi was a game. These guys didn't get serious to show, no, we are for real. And I think that's what we're starting to see with Xavier Woods. And he's saying, you know, and it's interesting how this character arc for Xavier Woods showing us how the way you view yourself impacts the way others view you. So he thinks everybody's looking at him through the lens of, I'm not a former world champion, because that's front of brain for him. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. Well, they don't see me this way because I haven't done this or I haven't done that. So he needs to be able to explore that. So if he gets the opportunity to be a champion, oh, it's going to be a problem, because he now figured out this is the way that I can go about getting it. No, I don't have to do bootios, and no, I don't have to cosplay. I can do that on my own time. As a matter of fact, I can go to all the Comic-Cons with my brand new championship. So I think that's how he's going to roll. And we could see something that we haven't seen before. And I'm actually really excited about that.
Max, what do you think?
Yeah, for me, like I said, I'm here for a permanent heel turn. I think he could do some great stuff with it. It revitalizes the act. It puts him in the spotlight for once. I would even like to see, like I was just kind of mentioning, if he went on to kind of capture this title, the Intercontinental title, he's the heel, but Kofi is still like, as Kofi Kingston, he's still a face, and there's like the juxtaposition of, you know, why are you behaving like this? Why are you cheating to win? And Kofi maybe trying to, you know, get him back on side, get him back to the lovable Xavier Woods. Maybe before Kofi then turns over to the heel side, and we can kind of get, you know, heel New Day again, but this time without the jokes and the sing-alongs and stuff like early New Day was, even though they were heels then. Like a lot more kind of grown, mature heels that are kind of, you know, they're doing what they do to kind of get by, sort of thing. Yeah, I think this has a lot of legs. It just really depends on, you know, we're talking about the Intercontinental title. I was gobsmacked when Bron Breakker lost last night. I won't lie, like I was absolutely gobsmacked. So we're at a time where we've got Xavier Woods, one of the most experienced and one of the biggest talents in the company, now rising to prominence in this mid card. Jey Uso's now arrived at the top of this mid card, if you like. Bron Breakker, they may have sights on him becoming a challenger for Gunther, or staying in the mid card. We don't know yet. Bronson Reed is on an absolute tear right now. So the mid card is really cooking with some guys, and it's just going to be interesting about these belts. They've done such a good job kind of restoring the prestigiousness of the Intercontinental title.
Yeah,
you don't necessarily want them to be, you know, hot potato in it now around the place, but you know, we can see like it may not always be a long title reign to get someone over and to make them feel important.
And for me, I think that also is important for the Intercontinental Championship as well. You know, as you said, you know, we're talking about all these guys that are on the mid card that are doing great stuff. You still can, you know, you can mention the likes of Ludwig Kaiser. Sheamus is still about. Of course, you got Pete Dunne as well, and so many others. And I think with the IC title, yes, let's not do the hot potato thing, but at the same time, let's still give the champion, or whoever is the champion, people to be worried about. You know what I mean? And I think that's the part that's important. So to then be able to add Xavier Woods in the mix is brilliant. Yeah, I'm also thinking as well with this whole thing, you know, we've seen so many times, and we've asked the questions, and we've wanted to see maybe a breakup or a turn for the New Day or some kind of change in attitude. But I think the whole idea of a heel Xavier still with a good guy Kofi would be fantastic. I think it would be great. And then Big E kind of pops up at some point close to the 10th anniversary, if not on the day itself, or whenever they actually celebrate it on TV, to then add another dynamic. And people forget that, you know, it's been said so many times, Xavier Woods is basically the brainchild of the New Day. He's the one that kind of brought them together. He was the one that pitched the idea and all the rest of it. And he's the one that, as much as we've seen Kofi and Big E as champions, he's been the one that is the backbone of the New Day. So to see the aggressive side of him, to me, isn't a shock. Kofi, it's probably difficult to see Kofi as a full-on heel, as a serious guy. Big E, we expected it because he's a power guy, but when he became champion, we saw a little bit, as Gerard mentioned, but it's in his nature for him to be a little bit quirky, a little bit crazy. And he even said that in so many interviews when he was champion as well. But to see it with Xavier, I don't think everyone's going to question it. I think everyone's been expecting it for a long time. So I'm glad to see it happening. And I hope that our excitement in how many different ways it can go, we see not even just some of it, but a lot of it, because I think it will help in so many ways, not just Xavier, not just the New Day, but the whole roster in general, and especially the mid-card and where it can go. So it's going to be intriguing to see how it goes. Moving away from the New Day and Xavier, but still keeping our eyes on title challengers, we saw on SmackDown, of course, Naomi teaming with Bayley against Nia Jax and Tiffany Stratton. Whoever won the match, whoever got the pinfall, would then go on to face Nia Jax. Of course, we saw that both ladies pinned Nia at the same time. And of course, you know, I guess we expected it maybe, that Nick Aldis then decides, you know, instead of choosing one person, you two go ahead and have an actual number one contenders match. Mex, what are your thoughts in terms of where this is going? Are we getting Naomi going for Nia Jax's championship, or does she fail against Bayley on Friday?
This was just a very convoluted booking, by the way. Like the whole tag team, like if they won as a tag team, they should have just made it a triple threat match.
Right.
That's kind of what I thought it would be.
Right.
And then they've kind of arrived at what it probably should have just been in the first place.
Right.
But hey, we're here now. I think Naomi wins. I think Naomi's winning this, and I think this is to turn Bayley back to a heel. Almost prove Bianca right, because Bianca hasn't seen eye to eye of her. That kind of helps to reignite the top big three, as a threesome on TV. They haven't split or anything, but yeah, just to kind of give that more concrete. I just don't, and this is more for Bayley. I don't think Bayley has any legs in today's society as a babyface. Like, I feel like she's really struggled, and it might not be Bayley per se, it's the company and their booking of the women's division. But I just feel like nothing's really happening for Bayley since she's lost that title. Yeah, okay, she's come back in recent weeks. I'll challenge her, but there's no real intrigue. I don't think anybody cares. I don't think anybody wants to see Bayley as women's champion. I don't think anybody cared when Bayley was women's champion this year. Fantastic match at WrestleMania. Fantastic match. But apart from that, she hardly made TV. They put her on Clash at the Castle to face Piper Niven. So more of a moment for Piper. I just think there is very little in the just very little care for her as a babyface character. As a heel, I think there's legs. So maybe they have seen that this is just to create a divide between the two of them. It may not be immediate. I'm not saying that Naomi wins the match and Bayley turns straight away, but I feel like that's probably more so the direction I can feel / I want to see happen. Because Bayley, if she loses this, Naomi probably goes on to face Nia. I don't necessarily think Naomi will win, but then Naomi at least has Bianca and Jade somewhat. Bayley has nothing. Like, he really does have nothing, in my opinion. So yeah.
I can see in his eyes Gerard has a difference of opinion. But let me just throw this in there real quick. So, you know, you mentioned about Bayley, you know, people not really caring about her when she was champion. In a very funny way, when I look at it, especially just over very recent, probably this year, probably 2 years at the most, maybe. any female that has been champion, I almost feel as though no one's cared. Maybe down to the booking more than anything else, but it's kind of like with Rhea, she held the championship and didn't have enough defenses. There was no one to face. We're getting the very same thing with Liv Morgan. You said the same thing, you said about what happened with Bayley. Nia Jax, it kind of feels that way as well. Yes, we were glad to see the run up to her becoming and the chase to her becoming champion. Now she's champion. I'm like, what's going on? It seems to be more about putting over Tiffany Stratton than it has been about putting over Nia as the champion. The other point I want to throw in there is also, I'm not too sure about the whole heel turn thing, because we've seen Bayley now kind of going a little bit back towards the hugger stuff in terms of at least her attire. I noticed that on Friday, she had the whole streamers on her arm, and her attire was very different, very similar to the hugger Bayley. So I don't know. But Gerard, what are your thoughts?
Boy, you guys gave me a lot to work with. I'm going to start by saying I don't think that the issue is that it's bad booking for Bayley. I think that Bayley as a heel is more germane to who she is than as this lily white baby face. I think that worked for her in the early part of her career to introduce her.
Right.
But we've seen how she operates, her promos, all of the things, the spice, the spunk, that only really gets to happen as a heel. It doesn't get to happen as a face. I think people wanted her to have the Royal Rumble moment. I think people wanted her to have the WrestleMania moment, but I don't think that she's really able to carry off effectively being the good girl. I just don't think that's the case. So I think it's more germane to her to be a heel. So that makes things interesting. I mean, if you remember, if my memory serves me correctly, I thought when it was her and Sasha in the last run they had as tag champs, she's the one who turned on Sasha, when most of us figured out it would have been Sasha turning on her. So Bayley has this thing that when she's the bad girl, that's when she can find the most success, because it's easiest for her to be that. So I think part of what looks like it doesn't care is Bayley not being able to be this happy-go-lucky champion. She needed to be the champion with an edge, even if that's without damage control. And I think there was a way for her to break away from damage control without fully embracing the fans, much like Roman Reigns has yet to embrace the fans. He's saying a lot of the things that he said before. And I think having a Bayley do something like that would be more authentic to who she is. Now, in terms of people not caring about women's champions, I tend to think that the larger issues is that those champions, particularly Rhea and Liv and even Nia, are caught up in stories that kind of transcend the championship. The story. And so that's where you end up looking at the title almost secondary. And ultimately, if they are involved in something that's bigger than the championship, then they are stars long term. So you end up caring about them whether they have championships or not.
Yeah.
And so I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing. I think where there is a challenge is what we saw certainly on both SmackDown and Raw. There's a lot of buildup in the women's division for whoever the number one contender is, but there isn't a regular pipeline of credible contenders that are coming. And I think if we can get to that particular space, and again, that's on Raw and SmackDown. NXT doesn't have any of these problems. There's a pipeline, a mile long on that end. But in terms of Raw and SmackDown, there needs to be the effort to build multiple people as credible contenders for the championship. Like a couple of weeks ago when Mi Chin was fighting for the women's championship, I don't think anybody believed she was going to beat Nia, which is kind of unfair to put somebody in that position who you don't even think has a fighting chance.
True.
That's where I'm just saying they have to build up multiple contenders. So you know if so-and-so loses, they got to get to the back of the line because immediately waiting for them are the next 2 or 3 people. And right now, in terms of the women's championship, once we get past a Bailey and Naomi situation, which my 2 cents on that, I think it still becomes a triple threat. I think that Nia and Tiffany will somehow interfere with this whole adage of neither of them can go. And of course, it turns to triple threat. But I do see Bailey kind of having to turn back. At some point, she's going to turn on Naomi. It's going to happen. That's Bailey's nature. She's a lone wolf, if we're completely honest. So I see that, but I would like to see Naomi have a championship so that the big 3 actually holds gold at the same time. That would be a crazy visual.
That would be a phenomenal visual. You say that, both of you are saying that we're expecting to see Bailey turn on Naomi at some point. In any way, can we see it the other way around?
I don't think so. I think just because of what we have seen, they probably trust Bailey as the heel more. People still are very invested in Naomi. I'd say still want to see her kind of have like a second career at WWE sort of thing. With Bailey, I just think Bailey has never necessarily been about herself enough. She's always tried to do what's best for the division, what's best for the women. And it's funny, even Mercedes Moné was speaking the other day on her magazine about, how Bailey she's already looking at like a future in coaching and stuff like that, opening up her own wrestling school. So yeah, I think Bailey would do what's the necessary for others sort of thing. And I think, like I said, I think Naomi's got way more legs as a baby face than she does anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting to see because we talk about the 2 of them and we know that they're very close friends outside of the ring as well. And both of them, very recently have been, mentioned by other ladies in the business as people that are, very much about helping others and whatnot. But I think when it comes to the 2 of them, Bailey can say that she's had more success than Naomi. So maybe now, she's happy to kind of, not necessarily pass the torch in that sense, but, a very similar thing. Give her time to shine and do her thing. So yeah, I think it's probably more likely if anyone turns on anyone, it's Bailey or Naomi, and then Naomi gets to do whatever she needs to do. And yeah, if it is Naomi, if we get a triple threat or we get Naomi versus Nia, I don't see Nia losing. I don't want to see Nia lose just yet. It would be way too short. But I think it adds to whoever it is then, whether it still be Naomi, whether it still be Bailey, someone else pops up. I think it's better that Nia is the champion for whoever then chases her for that championship. I mean, it still could be Tiffany Stratton. That's on the card. She's got the Money in the Bank briefcase. You know what I mean? So that's definitely still a strong possibility. Speaking of women's championships and women's champions, we now know that Athena is now the longest reigning Ring of Honor champion of all time, men, women, anything else in between. She is the one. Instead of asking the question that we've probably been asking for the last year, when will she lose it? Gerard, my question is, how important is this for Athena? But also, do we get to see how important it is with Ring of Honor not being in the same position it probably was when the likes of a Samoa Joe became longest running champion, when Jay Lethal was breaking records, all that kind of thing. Do you think in any way it's lost a level of importance at all or been missed in any way?
So I'll start with your first point. How important is it for Athena? I think it's extremely important. For firstly, regardless of what people think of the current iteration of Ring of Honor, the history of Ring of Honor is something that will stand the test of time. it will be viewed and lauded as something spectacular among wrestling purists. It really will be the reason why, if people decide to order Honor Club, they'll order it to go check out that library, to go research these kinds of matches and moments that people hold so dear. And so when you start thinking of names like a CM Punk, a Bryan Danielson, a Nigel McGuinness, a Samoa Joe, Jay Briscoe, Jay Lethal, you think about these names that are so synonymous with Ring of Honor. And then you have a Black woman who has held a championship longer than any of the people that they call the great pure wrestlers and the great tacticians and whatever other nicknames you have. I think it's extremely significant. Couple that with the fact that this women's title, outside of the AEW women's title, is one of the youngest women's championships in women's wrestling. She has added a level of prestige to it, in having incredible matches, in just being so dominant. That's incredible. And she proves that there's life after WWE. And I think that's important for many wrestlers to be able to see. Now, to your second question, in terms of whether or not the lack of visibility for Ring of Honor and her as champion has caused it to lose its luster, it's a hard question to answer, but two things can be true at the same time. And those two things are: the history of Ring of Honor is what makes this so significant. The current environment of Ring of Honor and the current presentation of Ring of Honor causes it to hit a little less hard than it should. As we say this, I think back to, I believe it was Saturday on Collision, where the Ring of Honor Tag Team Championships were defended in a bunkhouse brawl. And I'm like, okay, that's cute for this makeshift team that won the titles on an AEW episode of Collision. But how is it that you don't have your current longest reigning Ring of Honor champion of all time not on AEW television at all? I think that is the real tragedy in this, where the AEW universe has an opportunity to make that mean something by putting her on television. My thought is this, and well, I don't know if you guys have, you probably have something akin to, like a Sam's Club or some sort of wholesale kind of space where people can go purchase things. What they do is they have these people, Costco, that's where I'm thinking, Costco, where they have these samples. And they sample these great products, right? And you taste the sample, and the idea of the sample is, oh my God, that's so good, I need to go buy some. I think where AEW is missing the boat is, you have the longest reigning Ring of Honor champion currently on Ring of Honor. Let that be your Costco sampler. Right. Put her on Dynamite. Put her on Collision. Let her run through somebody and say, this is what you get to see on Ring of Honor. And then people will go shell out the $9.99. But to keep her exclusive to Ring of Honor such that nobody can see her, and your only real telltale sign of Ring of Honor is the tag team champions or Mark Briscoe and his conglomeration, who's never in a singles match anymore, and he's only known for the word of the day now. What are we doing? Right? So they're shooting themselves in the foot, and it's why it doesn't feel as great as this should. We should be able to shout this from the rooftops. But the question then is, okay, so where do we see her? And if she's so great, why isn't she on cable television or something that people can readily see?
I think that's a great point. And you've also given me, in everything that you've just said, you've also given me a word of the day, which is juxtaposition. Because with everything in terms of Athena's reign as champion, the whole thing with Ring of Honor and AEW kind of not making sense yet. The other thing about Athena's championship run is she's defended her title 22 times. We've just talked about another women's division and other women's championships where we've seen very little defenses, but yet long reigns.
Right.
Now, that's a great thing. She's then continued to prove herself by beating, by having 30 different proving ground matches.
Right.
So she's beating people all the time, different women all the time. But yet, we're still sitting here thinking, who could possibly beat her? Because they've then not built up other women really to be realistic contenders.
Mm-hmm.
Mex, how confusing is that? Because as I said, I tried to avoid the question, but it almost has to be asked. Who's going to beat her? When is it going to happen? How? And almost why?
Billy Starks will beat her. When, why, etc., I don't know. However, at this point, that should be a feud or a title change that the world is waiting to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much how we know who's gonna beat Roman Reigns, who's gonna beat Gunther.
Right.
It became the legend of who is slaying the dragon, sort of thing. And I'm not being funny when I say this. This is pretty much why Jade Cargill left. In terms of
absolutely,
what are we doing? Like, no one can ever tell me Jade Cargill must have just enjoyed sitting around with a title around her waist, squashing people in 60-something seconds or whatever the case may be. She's got 60-odd wins. Okay. Is that why you're flying her out into TV every week? Like, you can't really sell that to me as, she enjoyed it. She had a great time. Like, she's practically had to start her entire career, rightly or wrongly, all over at WWE again. I think with Athena, this is an established wrestler, way more established than Jade Cargill. She's put on great matches in this defense. She's told great stories with this title. And she, like Gerard said, should ultimately be AEW's secret weapon. Best kept secret. We have this annihilator in Ring of Honor who is like, oh, can you hear that? Who's coming? Athena's coming to Dynamite. Oh my gosh, who's she gonna face? Just kill off someone in Dynamite, and then she's back to Ring of Honor, and it's like, okay, let's go and see what Ring of Honor is doing. 1 or 2, when is Athena coming to the main show? That should be the discussion. But as far as I'm concerned, they didn't make. I saw a vignette or something like that. They didn't make enough of a song and dance about her achieving this goal. And what should be happening, one of two things. This one probably won't happen. She even needs to hold that title now, because you've missed the point of dropping it or passing it on and some of the challenges and stuff like that. You missed it. You even need to hold that title now until All In Texas, her hometown, and she has a big defense there or something like that, and that's July next year. So I don't think that would happen per se. Or she drops the title before then, and we are now getting her up to AEW main show and building her as an absolute credible somebody that is winning the women's title in Texas. Because right now there is no growth, no trajectory, no nothing. Like, even the Billy Starks story side of things has kind of went quiet because Billy Starks has went off. She obviously became a champion, which she's lost now. But it's like, what are we doing here? Like, we are seeing people, big talents, leave that company because of just mismanagement, misbooking. And this is someone that is now, like you guys have mentioned, is in the record books of this company. But without sounding disrespectful, what does it really mean?
And that's the sad part, because we talk about the history of Ring of Honor, we talk about the current champions, how they've been used. Your Jay Briscoe on TV every week, if not every single AEW show every week. With the conglomeration, is the Ring of Honor champion. It gets mentioned, yes, but no one's really caring. They're not, as far as I can see, I can see, like, there's no one being built up to challenge him on a one-on-one level for the Ring of Honor Championship. We've got Dusty Rhodes holding 2 sets of championships. And Sammy Guevara is now an ROH tag team champion, but yet we're not seeing the person who's held a championship for the longest ever. It makes no sense. And I think for me, as you said, Max, I think it has to become a priority in a way for Athena to go over or win some type of championship in Texas next year. It has to be a thing because hopefully it's not her still holding the Ring of Honor championship. It would be nice to say, it'd probably be like around 900 or 1,000 days by then. But I think it's more important that she moves up to the main shows and either becomes the AEW Women's Champion or at least the TBS Champion by then, if not before, at least on that show at some point. Otherwise, it would just feel pointless. And we are getting back to this space very similar to where Jade Cargill was, where she hit this record, but no one cared. No one cared because there's no viable contender. Nothing was really happening with her. They didn't really make a song and dance with it. Yes, she had a bit of a celebration thing in the ring, I think, like a week later. But the booking, the importance of it just was completely missed. And I feel as though that's what's happening here, and it's a real shame. 1 for Ring of Honor, 2 for Athena. And even more so for the ladies that are in Ring of Honor, because on paper it's a great division. On paper it's a great division. Even on the show when you get any 2 ladies face each other, they put on a great match, but yet it kind of doesn't lead anywhere because they're not necessarily building anyone. They're just throwing them in a match. Do your fight, come on.
Here's an equally scary thought. Athena has not participated in a single All-In. Like Houseway. How? She literally watched All In London from home. How do you do that? So there's that. What's also interesting about this part of the conversation is, if I were to have a word of the day, it would be conundrum. And that's because when we started this conversation about women's championships and do we care, in WWE, we've got women's champions who have not defended half as much, but they are big stars because we're seeing them on TV involved in regular stories that transcend the championship. Then in the Ring of Honor, you have as fighting of a champion as you can have in Athena, 22 title defenses. There would have been more, but because of the 30 proving ground matches, they couldn't beat her. So she's fighting, she's showing herself as a champion, but that doesn't seem to matter. So the conundrum is, which is it, right? It's got to be some healthy balance of being involved in a story that's not solely around the championship, that allows you to be a star and a recognizable figure, yet somehow having title defenses that actually matter, because people don't seem to like either of those extremes in terms of those scenarios.
Max, do you think it's a problem in terms of, Ring of Honor only having, I think it's 4 pay-per-views a year? Do you think that adds, is it only 3? I knew it was, I thought I was being nice. Do you think it adds, that adds to the problem we're getting in terms of can Athena be beaten? When is it going to happen? Because I'm guessing we'll have to wait till Death by Dishonor is the earliest time she's going to lose, which is in December.
Well, Final Battle, December.
Final Battle, sorry.
Yeah.
No, it's not an issue. Because until this past Ring of Honor pay-per-view that happened maybe about a couple of months ago, Mark Briscoe won the title at Supercard of Honor and was never on Ring of Honor TV.
Correct.
Until he had to now turn up to sell a program. Eddie Kingston, previous Ring of Honor world champion, the same, never showed up. There was a whole story about him not showing up, and Athena saying, "This is my show because you never show up."
Right.
So you clearly don't need Ring of Honor TV or pay-per-views to push somebody. And where she has done such great work, like I said, she should almost be this phenom that, what's coming around the corner. Athena, she's coming to AEW, whether it's Collision or Dynamite. we clearly don't care about Ring of Honor. And more so, we don't care about the women's division of Ring of Honor, because the men champions, the male champions still get on. Sammy Guevara is a tag champion that just, you know, like we said, he just defended the title. He's got a match with Okada this week, doesn't he?
Yep.
And that's a Ring of Honor mid-card champion. So you don't know how to bring up Ring of Honor roster members, Ring of Honor men, Ring of Honor champions to AEW. You just don't want to bring up the greatest Ring of Honor champion of all time. That's what it is.
How much sense does that make?
It's madness.
So I don't think it's anything to do with the pay-per-views, whether they're on TV, whether nothing to do with that. When it's all there, they can do it when they want to. It's as simple as that. They just don't want to.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just a damn shame that it is how it is. It's crazy. The whole Ring of Honor thing is just crazy. Moving away from Athena a little bit, and AEW. We've been away for 2 weeks. In those 2 weeks, Pro Wrestling Illustrated, PWI, put out their annual 500 PWI 500, listing the best 500 wrestlers in the world, mainly men, but they also include females who also take on men on a regular basis. Obviously, there's criteria involved and all the rest of it, which everyone seems to forget when they comment. But we saw, of course, Swerve at number 2, the highest ranked black wrestler on the list, but the only one in the top 10. Second to him was Moose, who was at number 20, so just about made the top 20. Was it 15? My bad. Made the top 20. And then Alex Kane was just underneath him,
25
as well. First question: How do we feel about the list in general? So just a quick list in general. And in any way, does it bother you, or do you think it's probably, incorrect? I'm trying to think of a better word, but incorrect, that we've missed, as in black wrestlers have missed out on being in the top 10 or top 20, or maybe should there have been more? First question.
I think this year's list was probably one of the more fairer and better lists in recent times. We weren't overly trying to push anyone in, although I think Mystico at 10 can be discussed.
Yeah, that was
that was probably the anomaly. But other than that, I genuinely feel like it was a really fairly put together, a well-measured list. Swerve finishing second is fantastic. I literally feel like that was on a coin toss, of when he beat Ospreay earlier this year. Like, I feel like literally the winner of that match finishes second, and Swerve won it. And yeah, but obviously Swerve had a great title run following that anyway, which I think was pretty much all captured within the evaluation period, as well as his run to the title. So it couldn't have been a better year for Swerve. Swerve had to be as high as, second, top 3 for sure. And then I think the rest is very reflective of where wrestling for black men has been in the past year. It hasn't really been our year. Coming out of the pandemic, we had a lot more names that were present. We've spoken about this before. Like, it seemed like black people were ready to take their risk against COVID and fight for their chances, where maybe some of their counterparts didn't want to come outside around that period. And that's why a lot more of our guys were kind of reflected in the list and higher up the list. But yeah, Moose being the second person on what is the third biggest product in America probably says a lot, that there's a gulf right now, and there's not a lot of great stuff happening for the black men, the black talents. Working for these companies and stuff is great and all, but what they've been involved in during that evaluation period hasn't necessarily been enough. So personally, I don't have any qualms of it. very happy to see Swerve get his flowers and be as high as he was. And I think the rest was pretty fair.
Gerard, yourself?
I will agree. I do feel like this list reflected what the last year in pro wrestling looked like across the board, which I thought was important. To Mex's point, we've seen years before where there was clearly an effort by the editors and those who were putting the list together to cause us to look a certain direction. This year, they said, we're really going to reflect what the year brought to us. I think this list, well, before I say that, let me say this. I think it's important that people understand that just like in any sport, there are ebbs and flows. There's momentum. There are years where your favorite player or team are just on it and they hit everything. And then there are other years where somebody else has more momentum. I think this was one of those years where there weren't a lot of Black male wrestlers in the upper echelon of what people were talking about in general. The however in comma is don't miss what everything from 20 to 100 looked like. Because to me, what that told me is we got next. Literally, when you look at this list, from an Alex Kane at 25, which think about it, he was not on any major television program in the last year. He was the MLW world champion. Shout out to what they're doing. He did some things in action wrestling, but by and large, he was not on our TVs every week. So for him to be ranked that high is significant. And then 3 spots under him is Trick Williams. Now, when you start thinking about the last year in terms of Black wrestling, Trick Williams kind of being number 5 amongst our Black wrestlers makes sense. He hit a hot streak. We saw his chase for the NXT championship, his program with Carmelo Hayes, him winning the title, the Whoop That Trick era and chant. Like, he really became a star this year. So I think you look at that. Michael Oku at number 38. I know you guys lost it but here again is another guy who has been doing the work worldwide, has not been on American television very much, but the buzz, the caliber of work he's done, all of those things really add up. An Obafemi at 53 in his first year of eligibility. Like, so I think as we look at this list, for those who are looking, Shug D, shout out to him, number 73, the Pan-African world champion, won that title this year in this evaluation period, ending the reign of Trisha Dora. I mean, you're looking at a lot of guys who have next. And so if they continue on that trajectory, an Obafemi, an Oku, a Trick Williams, quite frankly, a Carmelo Hayes, who made the transition into the main roster, number 48 is still not a bad space for him to be in. Looking at what he's going to do, I think next year, barring injury or anything like this, we're going to see a lot of those names start to creep up into the top 20. If they can, think about this. Next week, we've got the NXT's debut on CW, and Trick Williams is fighting for the NXT championship that night. The exposure onto the CW is about to make Trick Williams, Obafemi, Lash Legend, like a lot of these Black stars, household names, because they'll be on broadcast TV here in the States. So I think we just have to, this is one of those things where the guard is changing. Bobby Lashley, who had been top 5 previously, was not very active this year. We had no action from a Big E. Moose was the world champion for a short period of time. So there are a lot of things that happen with some people who used to be in those spots that aren't in those spots anymore. So this was a really solid reflection. And then you get a Javon Evans who made the top 100. Right? Like a Brian Keith at 116. Like we're really seeing some guys who hadn't crept this high before creeping up there. So think about the name that Javon Evans will have in a year now that he's going to be on the CW, and he's getting this match at Randy Orton in 2 weeks. Right?
That's crazy.
It's nuts. So I think for people who might be upset, where are our black stars? They're cooking right now. And they're going to be really, really, really ready. And they will be household names, a lot of these, by next year. So we'll be looking at a much different list this time next year.
Yeah. I completely agree in terms of, the list in general, how it's reflected wrestling in, during that evaluation period. It seemed a lot fairer. And I think the nice part, or a positive way to look at previous years, and kind of almost feeling as though we've kind of been forced to look, at a certain way, whether it be the Japanese wrestlers or the year that we had so many black wrestlers on the list and whatnot. I think we're now in that space where everywhere's now actually being looked at.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas for a few years, they seem to only look at Japan, or, try and get us to look that way. Mm-hmm. When it was a lot of the black stars, and they had Righteous Reg get involved and whatnot, it was our time for people to look at what we were doing as, black wrestlers and all the rest of it. Now we're in this space where they're looking at everyone equally, and it seems a lot fairer. It makes a lot more sense. You mentioned the likes of Alex Kane, Javon Evans, Obafemi, but let me shout out AJ Francis, who has done phenomenal work in the last 6 to 8 months. Another person who was released from WWE very recently, Sidney Akeem, managed to get himself on the list as well, doing stuff in GCW and things like that. And it's crazy to think that even with Obafemi, I think for me, I saw more argument or comments about Obafemi's spot. People expecting and wanting him to be higher, and that makes sense. But it's mad. Come this time next year, he'll be way higher. He'll
Much
be
higher.
Way higher than that. He's about to, break the record for the longest reigning NXT North American champion. That seems to have happened in like 4 weeks. It's
right.
weird. It's come around so quickly. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And he's going to break that record. No one's beating him anytime soon. He's probably not even going to have a defense up until then. Something like that as well. When you look at it properly, it's literally where they should be. And we need to remember it's 500, a list of 500 people, not 50.
Right.
So just because you guys are not in, the top 20, the top 30 or 40, the fact that a few of them are in the top 100, even top 200 is great. It's great. You know what I mean? You need to look at it like that. They're in the top half of the best in the world. And also, again, I push this thing so hard. Criteria is a thing.
Yes.
Criteria is a thing. So while Trick Williams is one of the most popular guys on the planet right now and in wrestling altogether, he held the championship for a very short time. He's not really had, the greatest win-loss record. It's definitely not a favorable win-loss record.
But Trick is high. Trick is high on this list.
It's still He's still high. The reason why he's not higher is because he didn't have a long title run. In my eyes, if the title run was longer, he'd probably be even further. He'd be further up easily. But all of those things have to, you have to look at all of those things as well. So it makes sense and it works for me. To focus on one guy, the two people I want to focus on, go to the first one is Moose. So Moose came in at number 15, second highest black wrestler. But there was a comment that he's made in an interview, I think it was last week, where he said that he sees himself retiring in TNA when his contract is up. I think there's a few, maybe 2 to 3, I think 4 years.
No, 4 years left, yeah.
4 years left on his contract. And one of the biggest reasons why is because he wants to feel synonymous with TNA. Just like the likes of, and he mentioned this name, AJ Styles. The likes of a Samoa Joe, maybe even a Christopher Daniels. And there's a few other names you can think of. Mex, that sinister smile on your face lets me know that you've got something to say. I'm going to ask you this question. Is Moose already in that space of being synonymous with TNA? And do you think in general this is a good decision or way of thinking for him?
I don't know whether this is like a tactic to adhere himself to fans or whatever the case is. You know, respectfully, you want to wrestle for the best and biggest companies in the world, and you know, we live in a day and age where there's multiple of them these days. TNA being, yes, up there, but like even the names of the synonymous TNA lads of AJ Styles, Christopher Daniels, what's his face, Samoa Joe. None of them work for TNA anymore.
Correct.
And all three of them are still working. They are still all wrestling. You know, it's not like a retirement thing. So it's like, okay, you can be synonymous, and I would agree with your question. Yes, he is synonymous with TNA at this point. But you know, you go and see, you know, what where the grass is greener. You go elsewhere. You can try other things. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. If he wants to kind of help TNA, and he'll actually do more for TNA if he actually went elsewhere and came back to TNA and actually help raise the profile of TNA. This guy went outside, he done XYZ, he's come back wrestling for TNA. Yeah, I think this is, how do I say this and not get in trouble like Gerard would say? I think it's a very kind of small town mentality, maybe. Like, why do you want to be the big fish in this small pond rather than going out and challenge yourself? He's got more to offer. He knows he's got more to offer. You know, if they called him tonight to come onto NXT, he'll pack his bags and run. Like, and I don't mean that like he's running from something bad in TNA. It's just the opportunity that even lies in NXT is massive. So yeah, I think, you know, you can say I love the place and all of this kind of stuff. Okay, cheap plug. A couple of weeks ago, I interviewed Josh Alexander, whose contract is up in February next year. And he said, like, I've never been a free agent. As I came to America, I signed to Impact, and I've been here for coming on to like 5 years now as the length of my contract. I would be foolish for the sake of my family to not see what else is out there. And even just on that level, Moose needs to have his eyes wide open. Being synonymous with TNA there's no like trophy for that, because even the ones you are looking up to left for pastures new. So yeah, I would like to see him retract that statement and test out other places. Because yeah, the TNA faithful don't just watch TNA either. So
very true.
So
yeah. First of all, shout out for that interview. Your comments or Josh Alexander's comments and from that interview went all over the world. And it was amazing to see WrestleManiac UK underneath actually being given credit as well, which was beautiful. But yeah, with Moose, Gerard, do you feel as though he has now kind of almost, you know, now has this almost defeatist mentality? Because we know for a fact that 2, maybe 3 years ago, WWE tried to sign him. He decided to stay with TNA. Bad move. And do you feel as though he now feels as though that opportunity's gone?
I don't know that he feels like the opportunity is gone. What I do think is, to Mex's point, you know, some people like the idea of being a big fish in a little pond. And I think one of the challenges for someone like Moose, who has been in the wrestling business as long as he is, it's the possibility that he may have, number one, gotten accustomed to the schedule of TNA. You know, the thing about TNA is they don't do house shows. There's not nearly as much travel as there is in WWE. You know, even with WWE and talks of them potentially pulling live events back, you still have TV, you know, which if you're on Raw or SmackDown, will be weekly, plus some live events, plus some, you know, premium live events and things of that nature. So you're going to be traveling a lot more. The expectation of live TV versus taped TV, all of those things are things that I don't know that he wants to devote himself to. I don't want to put words in his mouth.
Fair.
But I think when you get used to, you know, you do TV once a month or twice a month, you know, and you can take 4 weeks of TV in 2 days, and you're only traveling to 2 cities as opposed to 4 cities a month. Or if you're doing live events, probably, you know, 4 a week, right? That's not as attractive to some people. Jade Cargill just did an interview not long ago, and one of the things that she said was the WWE travel schedule is bananas. You know, it's much different when you come from a company where you only traveled once a week or once a month. That travel, I think, could be a lot for him. Yeah, I'll say it that way. That there may be some lifestyle things that he's gotten accustomed to that going to WWE would challenge. Certainly, I think, you know, the competition would be different. The exposure would be different. Does Moose stand out in a WWE culture? Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. Can he work on a live situation? I think that could be the other thing to consider, because you know, in a taped environment, you have plenty of opportunities to get it right, you know. But if you're live, it's one take Jake, you know, and if you can't do it, believe it or not, there are plenty of people who are catching it on TV who will put you, you know, on Botchamania or wherever in a heartbeat. So I wonder if those things. Now, the tough part about saying you're synonymous with TNA is, to be synonymous with one place, you have to go multiple places so that people determine where they remember you at.
True.
If you've only been at TNA, we can't align you with WWE. You've never been there. We can't say, oh, he's an AEW guy. You've never been there. You've only been at TNA. So that's all we could ever call. You literally just forced a label on yourself. At least with everybody else who he's calling a TNA guy, they've been to WWE, Japan, AEW. They've been other places where we can now say, where was their most significant contribution? We can't say that for him because his only contribution has been TNA.
And it's crazy to think that, you know, both your points, you know, are true. In the sense where, you know, it can sound as though, you know, he just wants to be a big fish in a small pond. But it's also true that, you know, being used to the lifestyle of a TNA, where it is, you know, 4 weeks are done within 2 days, and that's the only thing you're doing for a month. And, you know, we've got to remember as well that he does have a son as well. So maybe in being accustomed to that lifestyle helps him with his family life as well. Those things are very true. So it's tough, but as I believe, so as wrestling fans, obviously we're only seeing these people who are on TV. That's our first thought. That's the only thing we can see. That's the tunnel vision that we have as fans. And we want to see someone like Moose, who, like I said, had the opportunity to be signed by WWE, to see him in that space, to become a star in that space, would be great. But life is life. We've said it on here so many times when we've talked about Naomi and why she decided to go to TNA, why she stayed there as long as she did, what was her reason for coming back to WWE, all of that. And we talked about lifestyle choices and stuff that, you know, decisions that were made that were outside of the ring, you know what I mean, and all of that, and those things that they have to think about as well. So it's interesting. For me, when reading it, it was disappointing to hear. But at the same time, you know, you've got to think about all these other things, and there must be a reason. But for someone like a Josh Alexander, on the other hand, who also does have a family, you know, ready to push himself for his family. So it's a tough one. It's a tough one, but these decisions are not for us to make. It's for them. They have their reasons and say what they say and have their reasons for saying it. So yeah, it's interesting. I hope to see him being pushed even further in TNA. What he did with the championship on his last run, forming the system, I think was a great move in TNA and for him. But him now not as champion, it kind of feels I don't know what they're doing with him, what they're going to do with him next, how they're going to push him back up necessarily. Yes, he had his match with Nick Nemeth the other day, but where does it go for him from here in TNA? For him to be synonymous with TNA, I completely agree with the whole thing of, AJ Styles, Samoa Joe. They went on to become champions in other places.
Mm-hmm.
Same with, Drew McIntyre, Bobby Lashley. There's so many names you can mention who are, even a Kurt Angle,
mm-hmm.
who are synonymous with TNA and Impact because they were big in other places as well as.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's interesting. The final person I want to focus on from that PWI, of course, is Swerve. Highest ranking black wrestler on the list. Number 2 on the whole list, as I said before. But at the moment, we haven't seen Swerve on TV for a while. We know that he has this upcoming match with Hangman. Gerard, what are your thoughts in terms of him not being on TV? Does it hinder where we're going with Swerve and where this match, or what this match can kind of the result of the match can turn into eventually?
In terms of Swerve, I don't think it hinders anything. I think given all that he's done in the last year and change, the way he's carried, really, you could argue 2 years, the way he's carried AEW on his back, become one of its most popular stars, becoming a champion, after Samoa Joe, filling in where there was no MJF, all those kinds of things. And quite frankly, the road that he went on, because we on here were like, okay, are you guys treating him as a champion? That space to proving his worth, giving Ospreay his first AEW loss, and then the way he went into, All In London, it was very clear, okay, there's a lot of really good that he has done in terms of fashioning himself as a main event star. He deserves a break. He certainly earned that. And the way that cage match was so brutal, it should have taken him out for a bit. That chair shot to the head and all the craziness that happened, that should have happened. Now, what I will say is, while I don't think the star of Swerve has suffered, I wonder how it's impacted AEW's overall presentation. Not having a Swerve on your television screen, not having, it feels like whatever's going on with him and Hangman continues because Hangman is just being Hangman. But there's a bit of swag that's not on AEW television right now. And I think what they were doing in terms of working and getting into the conscious space of certain cultures isn't happening with what's currently being presented.
I made the mistake of saying there's an upcoming match. I was thinking about the match that's already happened.
I was just like, okay, maybe I missed it, which is possible. Because things change quickly in AEW. So
I got confused. But yeah, we know that there's going to be some type of return for Swerve, and I'm sure in some way it's going to involve Adam Page. In some sort of way. Mex, can you kind of book as you do secretly for AEW and WWE any type of return and what it could possibly look like for Swerve?
I can't, because obviously right now he's not on TV. Rightly so. We saw him get plummeted at the end of a cage match. I don't know. I think from the timeline and what we had thought, interview with Danielson and others, and it looked like Danielson and Swerve would have been the Wrestle Dream match.
Right.
And Swerve probably wins the title back there, retiring Danielson, and that fits in with the whole Danielson wanting to lose to a Washington guy. However, Swerve's not on TV. Darby's number one contender. Darby's about to face John Moxley for the number one contendership, which he's putting on the line. It's probably more so looking that Moxley retires Danielson, if you want a bit of booking from me, that's what I think I'm heading to. And then maybe Darby wins the title at a later date off Moxley, sort of thing. But Moxley is going to be the big bad guy to bear the, taking it off Danielson and all of that kind of stuff. And like I've just mentioned, I don't know where Swerve fits into any of that. It could be, he comes back at Wrestle Dream or whatever the case is, and he just does some other stuff in the meantime. I don't know what that particularly will look like. I think just on the Hangman front, we might circle back to Hangman winning the title at some point, maybe next year. I don't think anytime soon. And that is the only point where I would necessarily want to see those two come to blows again, sort of thing, over the championship this time, which is obviously so integral to their story. So yeah, I don't know what the rest of the year looks like for Swerve, because what I had in mind doesn't look like it's going to happen now.
That's true. And it was interesting because, as you said, from what Danielson said in the interview that you guys had, and all the rest of it, that it's going to be he wants to kind of almost pass the torch onto a Washington guy, or push a Washington guy. The light switch turned on in my head as we saw Darby Allin and Moxley. Darby Allin's also a Washington guy, so he didn't actually mean Swerve.
Yeah.
So there's a strong possibility of that. Does it mean that one of those two guys actually retires Danielson? No, it doesn't. Again, it could be Moxley, and then one of those guys wins from him and does whatever they need to do to kind of push themselves up there, whether that's as a champion or not. Again, the answer is still very vague, really, and not as specific as we kind of first thought. Or interpreted it in when we first heard it. So yeah, it's difficult to see where Swerve kind of fits in or gets back to where he was. In no way am I expecting him to be less important or further down the card or whatnot. But to see for us to expect or want it to be how you predicted a few weeks back, Max, it looks very hard. That doesn't look as likely that it's going to happen in that way. But yeah, I can definitely see it would need to be. It would only make sense for it to be involving Adam Page in some way. But I'm sure. I mean, he's just signed this massive contract. In no way is he going to be then sidelined or having matches with I don't know, Brandon Cutler or something. What I mean? Like, it's not gonna be one of those situations.
He'll be good. I mean, just in other news, obviously we've got a Ricochet Will Ospreay match on the horizon for the international title. I would expect Ricochet to maybe win that. I can't lie, because it's like, come on, we need to prove something. And Swerve Ricochet later down the line for that title could be fun as well. Yeah, Swerve can't come back from just getting absolutely his head knocked off in a cage match from a steel chair to walking into a title shot. It's not really gonna happen unless we're playing, telling kindergarten stories here. Then a man shouldn't come back from that and walk into a world title picture. Yeah, we'll see where it goes, but there's plenty of belts in AEW, as we know. There's plenty of opportunity, and they've created an absolutely superstar in Swerve, so he shouldn't find it hard to find himself back on the card once he has finished selling the headshot.
Just before we go, let's speak on that really quickly. Actually, for the last question I'm going to ask for the day, Will Ospreay, Ricochet. Is it happening too early?
Yes. The fact that this is on free TV, it should be at Wrestle Dream. It should be at World's End. It should be in a stadium. Why we're doing this now is,
I mean, fifth anniversary kind of makes sense.
No.
No?
That's free television. It's free
not enough.
television. This is a pay-per-view quality match. You know, the match that literally changed wrestling about 8 years ago. And we get it. And the buildup to it has been terrible.
Yeah, I think for me, that's the problem. It's not necessarily the too early part. I think, you know, even if it happened in the way that I think we tried to book on this show, where we thought that Ricochet was going to come out after Ospreay beat MJF, and then they had a match, you know, at All Out. That wouldn't have been too early. That would have been like a week after Ricochet was signed, but it wouldn't have been too early because it would have been done correctly in a sense. This little build up that didn't then work, then had a really weird promo that then was followed by another promo that started weirdly but still kind of ended okay. And then Ospreay is still fighting for the tag team champ. What are we doing?
Look,
what are we doing?
I'm going to mention my favorite word that I love mentioning when I'm talking about AEW because it never seems to improve, and that's perception. You have brought, yes, you have brought in Ricochet off the back of a fairly successful WWE run. You've debuted him at your biggest show of the year, pyro and everything. Not everyone gets pyro, so cool. You're showing us and telling us indirectly that this guy's a big deal, sort of thing. You have then consistently booked him in. Yes, he needs wins to go up the rankings and face people, but relatively, dare I say, uninspiring matches. Just like matches, like good matches. Let me not be harsh. Good matches that he's had with people, but it's like this is Ricochet that you're surely trying to kind of make us feel this is a big deal, and you're feeding us matches that he could have had at WWE. Nothing has changed. Nothing is special. We know this guy could wrestle. We know he's one of the greatest wrestlers on the planet, and now he is fully unlocked and can do whatever craziness that he has in his arsenal. You haven't taught us anything about Ricochet. We know as WWE fans, he can cut a hell of a promo backstage because that's all they ever let him do. They never let him cut a promo in the ring. It was like backstage when, you know, maybe when it's not live and we can re-record it if anything goes wrong. Ricochet is the man. And that's all he's done again in AEW, sorry. He's cut promos with Will backstage and stuff like that. And it's like, teach us something new about this guy that is going to elevate him in the minds of the audience, the fans. People are saying, oh yeah, Ricochet is great. He's going to be great in AEW, blah, 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 blah. And ultimately, he's been there for a month tomorrow. And this is pretty much Ricochet that was in WWE. Is it still early? Yes. Things can change. However, you're now building up to the biggest match that this move to AEW could have ever delivered us. Will Ospreay versus Ricochet. And you're doing it on free TV in the middle of a week. No arena, no stadium, not like a great legendary story. Where are the vignettes from the madness you lot were doing in Japan and Newcastle and all of that? Like, and yes, this could be like a longer term story that those come into play and all of that kind of stuff. But right now, it just feels like you are just giving me another probably 6-star match, which we're going to get on next Wednesday. And then in a month's time, we're probably going to have forgotten it.
All right, I'm going to say this very, very quickly, and that's this. AEW is booking like they don't have a future.
Literally, you know what? I've been thinking that all year. Literally been thinking that all year.
They're running out of time.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, they're not booking like, yo, they don't see, okay, we've announced All In Texas. Let's start lining things up to head to All In Texas. No, they're like, give it to me now. What? They had the opportunity to bring that match, Ricochet and Will Ospreay, in a stadium. Nobody else did that. They could have built to this, give us a slow burn, let them be on two, parallel paths, and then they finally start coming together around Double or Nothing, and we can see, oh, snap, this is going to happen and they can get us to Texas. Instead, nobody's driving to Texas. Nobody's flying to Texas. We're going to sit in the comfort of our own home. I don't know how many people are going to show up in Pittsburgh. Hopefully they can fill the arena. And that's where they're going to put the first time match in AEW for this. They're booking like they don't have a future. And that's a problem for me.
It's crazy because on the other side of wrestling, when we saw Ilya Dragunov move up from NXT, the only thing people have been waiting for is Dragunov versus Gunther. No one's even talking about that right now.
Nope.
No one's talking about it, and it's not because they don't want it anymore. It's just because WWE said no. Wait, just
same for Jade and Bianca. We're not talking about that, right? The second they said they were going to sign her, okay, when is it going to happen? Now we're loving their tag team title run. We're doing all the WWE acts like they have a future. AEW is literally booking like we're closing tomorrow. So let's give you everything we got right now. And that's just not wise. That's just not why. I don't understand it. I don't understand.
Wow, it's madness. It's madness.
I was just looking for the quote because I've definitely heard this in the last month. I think it was a week ago on Wrestling Observer. Brian Alvarez said that Tony Khan has started telling people there is no such thing as long-term booking anymore and everything is week to week. Now, I will caveat by saying not necessarily Brian Alvarez, but Meltzer hasn't had a very good record of late.
Correct.
But true.
The statement is Brian Alvarez claims that Tony Khan has started telling people there's no such thing as long-term booking anymore and everything is week to week. And I think that pretty much says everything.
Wow. That's scary. That's scary and that's worrying, man. And I think for me, if there was any kind of way to almost fix this whole Ricochet Will Ospreay thing, is if Ricochet gets attacked by someone who wants an opportunity, like a Takeshita maybe, and then we have to wait a little bit longer for that match. But I don't see that actually happening. It's just the way that it would kind of make sense to kind of prolong the wait. And I felt as though when Pac attacked Will Ospreay, I thought, okay, brilliant. Let's not do this whole thing with Ricochet just yet. If you're not going to do it properly, as Mick said, Ricochet has to pick up some wins, and wins mean something. Anyway, in AEW, so he needs to pick up some wins and blah blah blah. Sammy Guevara, Beast Mortals, great, but there needed to be more. There's needed to be more. I think he needed to have a good, strong feud with someone for a while before even thinking about going back towards the whole Will Ospreay thing. Not chatting with him backstage after every single match. Like, why is Will Ospreay begging to face Rick? What?
It's like, I don't like you mentioned. Obviously, Takeshita or someone could be involved. Possibly Takeshita, Carl Fletcher, one of those guys in United Empire or whatever they call themselves on the Callis, they could turn on Will. I don't think people will be happy if that is the end result of how someone wins or loses a title in this particular match.
Yeah.
If Will beats Ricochet, I think it's just a complete mockery. It's just a complete mockery.
Absolutely.
Like, I've baited you into wrestling me. For most part, Will has been laughing and being very jovial in this whole thing. Ricochet's been the one that's fired up. So if Will just wins, that's going to be hilarious. And Ricochet, I would say he needs to kind of win and literally win and tell Will, all right, shut up now. Done. I've arrived. I've beaten you for your title. Cool. And that maybe gives Will a wake-up call. I mean, in totality, this has come too early. But here we are. We'll see.
We are here. We are here, and I think as well, though, it's also a very difficult position in terms of the booking for Will Ospreay as well, or in terms of obviously he's going after the tag team championships. Does he lose that match too? Even if he wins, he becomes tag team champion with Carl Fletcher. It's not necessarily a thrown together tag team per se, but it's still kind of like, why? Are we just trying to give Will Ospreay every single title before he gets to the world title? Is that what we're doing? I mean, that's the only way it would make sense to me.
One better. Do you think, given obviously the Will coming out, or whether that new story was that Will wanted to take himself out of the equation when it came to Swerve,
Yes,
that's why he was happy to lose to Swerve. If he loses to Ricochet now, I mean, will it look like Will is just out here doing Salvation Army charity for AEW wrestlers?
That was the other point I was going to make, because I'm just like, he helped us make sense of him losing to Swerve. He helped us make sense of it after the match. Before the match, leading up to the match, when the match finished, I was like, what are we doing here? And then he gets, then he has this thing with MJF, wins back the title. Okay, it was probably just for the moment in Wembley, but surely he's losing to Ricochet. So he holds the title for what, 3 weeks? 4 weeks at the most? Why? I mean, again, as you said, that's the, as you put it, Salvation Army booking, because I'm just like, oh, and then my question would then be, are AEW that, don't care to where they're not thinking to put Swerve over themselves? They're not thinking to put Ricochet over themselves. It has to take Will Ospreay to pitch and say, "Oh, can you let my friends in, please?"
He's really good, I promise. Can you?
He's with me.
Oh, mate.
Nah. Surely. It's just crazy the way the booking is. The avenues that they're taking. Will Ospreay still winning every single match, but yet losing the big match. It's just a bit weird. It's all a bit weird. And as Gerard said, they're booking as though doors are closing, and all things must go sale is on now.
Oh, right,
so
right.
Get in. It's Black Friday, so get in, get your stuff, get out. Like, nah. I don't know. We watch it. We somehow watch it. Try to make sense of it, but I guess it gives us something to talk about every week. That's the positive.
That's right.
But we'll see what happens. I mean, it would be great to see Ricochet holding the championship. The way it's happened, how it's happened, is we can argue about that, of course. But to see Ricochet with a championship, it won't solve the whole why did he go to AEW. It won't. But at least he can say he's done something, which is cool, I guess. With that said, the show has been cool.
Yes.
And our time is up for sure. You have been watching WrstlXtra on the WrestleManiac UK YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe to see us every single Tuesday, and also like and subscribe to the WrestleManiac UK YouTube channel to see when this guy Mex puts out all of his reactions to AEW, WWE, everything else in between, and of course his Mex exclusives. You can use that name if you want, mate. I don't mind. I won't charge. It's cool. It's cool. Of course, he's got a number of interviews very recently. Also on his page. You can also find Mex on the Wrestling's channel. Like and subscribe to see when the man them put out all of their weekly content as well. You can find Mex on Gorilla Position, WWE GP, on all socials, I believe. You can also find Mex on X, WrestleManiac UK, and WrestleManiac.uk on Instagram. You can find the guy that is everywhere, Gerard Bonner, on all things Bonafide. Also, find him on WWT Live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday with the crew. You can also find Gerard Bonner doing all sorts of things, commentating. Oh, actually, you know what? Let me shout out. There was, I can't remember who it was, but there was this clip on Instagram with someone shouting out Gerard on his commentary skills.
Psycho Boy, Psycho Boy Fodder and Angelina Love. Yeah, and shout out to them.
Mate, I mean, Angelina Love just needs to mention my name, and I feel like I've made it in life.
Yeah.
So fair.
Yeah, I was like, wow.
Fair. And they did not hold back on the praise for you. And your commentary partner, remind me of his name again.
Yeah, Brandon Benefield. Shout out to Brandon.
Yeah, for sure. You can find Gerard doing his great commentary work and broadcasting for Ashe Wrestling, Southern Honor Wrestling, IWE, the Nightmare Factory, All Caribbean Wrestling,
Yes.
Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling. Keep going, but I can't remember.
I think that's all.
I believe that's all of it. Yeah. You can find me in the one place you need to find me, which is Black Wrestling Alliance on Instagram, sometimes BWA on X. Guys, thank you for your time. This has been ours, and we will see you again next time. Bye, guys.